Welcome, welcome everybody. I'm so happy you all joined in. Thank you for being on time. I am impressed. I love seeing everybody chiming in. Please add in where you're coming from. I see Ojochal, woohoo, Costa Rica, Washington, California, Florida, Los Angeles. Thank you for being here. I am very excited to jump in on such a deep, deep topic. Definitely a very popular topic here in the rainy seasons of Costa Rica and the rainforests around. So it'll be a juicy hour deep dive as to all the things: parasites, herbalism, traditions, cleansing practices, and beyond. Pura vida. I see more Costa Ricans in here. That's great. Welcome, everyone. I'm just giving like another little minute here just so everybody gets to hop in on time. So I'm teaching this wonderful class with Sarah, who's also a wonderful herbalist. I'll be doing the deep dive on all the parasites, and then towards the end, Sarah will come in and introduce herself and do the wonderful talking about the cleansing, community cleansing that's coming after. So we're very excited to, do all of it within this hot hour and a half together. We'll have a solid Q&A towards the end. So if you all are kind of listening in the background or want to have a super important question, please be sure to stick around or come in towards the end. So I wanted to start with how this whole topic began and why we started launching this kit and why is it important to even talk about parasites right now. So I'm born and raised in Costa Rica, and since I'm a kid, we used to classically get administered pharmaceutical medications twice a year to do parasite cleansing, routine cleansing, provided by the government. I remember even being a kid and seeing this like motorcycle guy roll up and just drop off free pharmaceuticals for us to do like our routine deworming as a family. And to this day, it's still provided as a free option here in Costa Rica, at least. And I know some other Latin American countries. And as you all know, it's always a talk of like third world countries being like the deworming parasitic type normality that is included in the lifestyle here. And what I've noticed is that a lot of people have dealt with this, not just because they took a trip to Mexico or a trip to Costa Rica and they got a worm. This is actually something very real everywhere in the world. So when I started as a kid noticing that I would just feel terrible after taking these medications, I noticed that my mood swings, not just because I was a teenager going through the routine of hormone craziness, I realized that the wipeout was so bad that it just didn't work. I was like, there's something else that has to work that is not just being wiped out by these super intensive medications. So we will dive into deeper as to why, when, and if to take them, but just to know, just to share a little bit of the story of how it all happened. So since then, I've been, obsessed with rainforest plants and studied them deeply. And it is not a coincidence that a lot of the rainforest medicines are very antiparasitic in nature, antiviral, bitter type plants that support the GI tract in its wholeness. So we will definitely be reviewing some of those. And it's beautiful to see how the rainforest, such a living place, provides so many of these medicines, and of course, worldwide, which is easy to include in your lifestyle, where it doesn't have to be such a massive catastrophic cleanse for you to integrate into your life for routine cleansing. So anyways, let's get started and get juicy. Next slide, please. So everything shared here is just for educational purposes. We always want you to consult your healthcare practitioner, your doctor, testing properly, and all before you self-administer any of the information shared. I want this to be very clear. This is not just, we're sharing scientific roles within this process, yet it is of utmost importance that you know that this is just for education and cleansing as a community for informational share. Next slide, please. Okay, so just a quick deep dive as to what parasites are and how do we get them. So I always say, like, if you've touched your nose with your finger, you might already have a parasite, no matter where you are. If you've sat on a communal toilet, you probably already had a parasite through there too. Bodies of water, lakes, soil, anything. There is so many points of transmission where we can expose ourselves to. Yet it is not all bad. There is no need to have fear and live in a reality where it has to be sanitized, because that also has its consequences. So just like our gut, life is filled with living organisms, and there's good organisms and bad organisms. And I think here it's more of a talk as to like, what kind of lifestyle choices can you do to neutralize the bad colonies from overpopulating your intestines and your body? So the word parasite comes from the word parasitos, which is also very similar in Spanish and Latin, which means one who eats off of the table of another. So classically, parasites feed off of their hosts. They don't photosynthesize on their own like plants in any way. They are just simply surviving also off of the host that they're living off of. A lot of these like single cell organisms, which are supposed to be the first organisms of life, can also thrive off of water or soil and other living organisms, not just humans. So again, there's good and bad everywhere. Points of transmission, like I was saying, can be a myriad of things. It can be through your pets. You know, pets oftentimes are licking their butts. Easy to expose yourself by touching your pet's mouth or any other part. There's also tons of skin penetration possibilities. Walking barefoot, like I was saying, obviously poor hygiene, living in unclean conditions, which is here is the whole stigma of third world countries having this. But again, this can be anywhere, anytime, even if you're in a desert. There's also insects and bug bites, which is also very common in rainforesty areas where certain bugs can lay eggs easily and looks like a bite at first. And then over time, it becomes like a worm under the skin, like botflies, for example. Person-to-person contact, sexual transmission, undercooked, unwashed fruits and vegetables. And classically, people speak a lot about sushi or raw fish, since those are the kinds of parasites that you can visually see with your eye. Oftentimes, like the other day, I was actually ordering a ceviche and I happened to see a worm coming out of the fresh fish as it was being filleted. And I was like, wow, it is real. How do we do it? How can we enjoy these foods without being paranoid? You know, anyways, that will be followed through, but let's go to the next slide to review the rest. So why are parasites important? Why do we need them? And what role do they play in our inner and outer ecology? So it is part of the web of life. Good parasites are fundamental, and some of them which that are actually medicines. For example, cordyceps is a very popular medicine that you see everywhere nowadays, even in coffee shops, and that is a classic parasitic delivery system where we use as medicine. So that is a very interesting food for thought. How can we use parasites to our benefit, like cordyceps? And how many other parasites perhaps exist that we don't even know that could actually support us and support our resilience to combating them? Also, ghost pipe, which is not usually commonly harvested due to how infrequent it is to see nowadays in the forest, but that is also a parasitic type fungi that you easily find, and it is a wonderful medicine. So it relies on mycorrhizal fungi to get its nutrients, and it looks absolutely beautiful. But I don't recommend harvesting it. It's just something to admire for now in the forest. Then, of course, mistletoe is another fantastic example of parasitic type entities. I like to call them plants that survive through other hosts. So while technically parasitic on trees, mistletoe provides berries and habitat for birds and insects, enhancing biodiversity. So again, very interesting. How many more parasites do we not know of that are supporting the ecology of our environment? And then, of course, we have insects and worms. So we have wasps and such that lay eggs inside of pest insects like caterpillars. The larvae consume the host from within, offering natural pest control. Also really fascinating to visualize that within our field. Next slide, please. So I wanted to also show, before we dive into the plants, the ecosystem of how the soil resembles our microbiome. The microbiome is filled with beneficial bacteria and also non-beneficial. It also hosts a wide variety of viruses and fungi. It has over 80 million genes of gut microbiomes that are essential to its health. So again, key bacteria that we need for survival and thrival. The soil, same thing. When you go and just work the garden bed and you see the soil in nature, it is filled with living organisms that are essential for its health. So again, like when you're prepping your compost for your beds or in a farm, it is essential that even the compost itself is kept with good bacteria before it gets pollinated or colonized by bad bacteria, perhaps defecting the garden growth. Same story. So the amount of bacteria in soil is identical to the amount of bacteria in our gut. Going back to the doctrine of signatures, this resemblance is key for us to understanding how to maintain our gut health. If the soil looks just like our gut and vice versa, that gives us keys as to like, how can I use this as a signature to keep myself healthy and vibrant? And I think the pH is also something very important to talk about. I see this a lot on Instagram on how our pH is similar to even vultures and lions and how we should just be eating meat, or other people that are more vegan say this is fundamental for, the growth and survival of our Earth, planet Earth right now, due to all the different environmental challenges and beyond. And of course, animal suffering and so on. So how do we understand pH perhaps as a mirror in this ecological process? So the gut itself, the stomach, is very acidic. And so our stomach is already designed to neutralize, kill pathogens and bacteria that is not optimal for our survival. So it is already intelligently wired to do this. It doesn't need additional support to do this if it is living in homeostasis with nature, right? That is the key. Once we have imbalance, of course, it might not be functioning properly, and therefore pathogens move through, affecting our health and creating perhaps acute or chronic diseases. So in this case, to understand that the gut is very acidic, it already relieves, in my opinion, the pressure of like, okay, our gut is already wired to do this. We are programmed to do this. Yet when it moves into the small intestine, it becomes a little more balanced, a little more alkalized in order to absorb the nutrients after they were broken down in the stomach. So this is why we find the majority of parasites in the small intestine and large intestine, of course, other internal organs like the liver and beyond. Yet the reason they stick in the gut so long is due to the acid alkaline balance in the small and large intestine. So I think that is a fundamental key right there. So regardless of the dietary choices that you choose, understanding the acidity and alkalinity of your food and your food groups is perhaps a way to understand how you're feeding your body over time, not just during a cleanse, just like as your lifestyle. So it is important to also just be intuitive and intelligent. It doesn't have to be micromanaging food, understanding the exact acidity pH system of it or not. But our body is already wired to neutralize pathogens if it's living in homeostasis. So here I added notes for those of you that want to go back to this, perhaps this section to dive deeper within your own lifestyle, the small intestine, the stomach's pH, and then same with soil, mirroring it back to soil. The soil is typically 6 to 7, which is similar to the small intestine within the pH scale, which also resembles how nature thrives. So if the small intestine is kept in that range, it naturally will also move the bad parasites out naturally. So I think that's the key, like knowing that your body has the knowing, right? So if the soil is similar to this with living organisms, we can achieve that ourselves as well. So although more acidic environments can support the growth of beneficial bacteria, it can inhibit harmful ones. So acid alkaline balance is fundamental. Just living an acid straight lifestyle, although a lot of people I know, for example, the carnivore diet, I've seen it, all over Instagram right now, and people losing a lot of weight and feeling fantastic through it. I think that's great. It works for some people and some not. Although I do think some essential plants and roots are fundamental, which also increase the ecology of our soil, play a huge role within our diet. From nomadic ancestors, other more sedentary ancestors, and so on, there are fundamental carbs and foods that were part of the original process of health, right? So let's move on to the types of worms, just because I know everybody loves this. Next slide. Well, first off, symptoms. So vomiting, frequent nausea, chronic diarrhea, chronic constipation or bloating. I think a key marker too is like, let's say when you wake up, we all feel great. We just had our fast through sleep. And so let's say your belly feels good in the morning. If you have immediate nausea and a very bad stomach frequently, not because you ate something huge at midnight or something, just frequently you wake up with that nausea, that is perhaps an indicator of parasitic presence. Same with sleep disturbances. If you feel like you're tossing and turning chronically in bed, not just from anxiety, or perhaps you're working on a huge project, chronically meaning beyond the season, it just doesn't go away. That is also a clear marker. Bad dreams, nightmares, anxious nightmares where you're running away or dealing with parasitic entities are also clear markers on a spiritual, emotional level that a lot of people have spoken about. which is also a key process within the cleanse that a lot of people also see when they're cleansing. Like you see the archetypal play of the gut as you are purging, which I think is beautiful to note and keep in a journal. Muscle twitching, itchy skin and rectum is like the classic, one of the more fundamental markers. Itchy rectum, which happens a lot in children. There's classically even newborn babies when they have, perhaps they can't itch themselves, but you see that they're kind of struggling. It oftentimes could be parasites from a very young age. And you can sometimes see the worms, the helminths in the actual diaper. So there's ways that you can also find it. Sometimes they are pooped out alive, and sometimes they're dead and you can barely see them, which we'll go through into in a little bit. Uncontrollable appetite, having like severe cravings in the evening. Parasites wake up at night. They're like night creatures. So if you have like uncontrollable sugary cravings at night, that's also a very big marker. Or carbs, excessive carbs, like you can't control yourself. You can't curb the feeling. That's also a key marker. They are very intelligent beings. They definitely send this signaling through craving. So it's really important to see and note that. And even disassociating from it helps, just so you can see it outside of yourself and not be perhaps manipulated into having that craving, perhaps, right? So craving sugar, like I was saying, anemia and iron deficiency is a big one. I've seen this a lot, where nutrients are just not absorbed, no matter the lifestyle and diet adapted to, including herbs. I've seen people just feel extremely depleted, extremely fatigued, even living a healthy lifestyle, quote unquote, and no success, nothing changes. So that's where a purge needs to happen. And oftentimes it is a parasite. And autoimmune disorders are also sometimes indicators of an overpopulated parasitic intestine. Again, it is achievable. This is, again, shared for educational purposes. Some doctors and some people have found other means to assessing and diagnosing, yet it can be parasitic based. And then last but not least, mood swings and depression. Also very key, ongoing chronic depression due to fatigue, like not feeling like excited to wake up most mornings, having this chronic like heavy burden feeling on your back that just doesn't go away. So again, I think with all these symptoms, processes and feelings that stick around and don't go away beyond the season is a very big marker here. So important things to ask yourself, like any of these symptoms, when did they start? If it's fatigue, when do you really feel fatigued? When did it start? Was it the project you were working on? Was it a lifestyle you started changing to, a place you moved to, a trip you went to? You know, things to think about. Are your symptoms constant or only sometimes? Meaning perhaps it was just an allergy to a specific food. Perhaps it was an allergy to a place, or just the emotions of the day. You know, important to really note how constant it really is being. Friends and family, since it's transmittable through families, just through touch, it's important to note that if your family members do have this, a confirmed case, then it perhaps could be, if you're having symptoms, it could be that it was interchanged. You know, things to think about. Where you traveled, if you live in the forest, or if you're living in the jungle, or if you move to the jungle and it's not your natural habitat, it's also very common to just get exposed as part of the introduction adaptation to a new terrain. That's very classic as well. Let's move on to the next slide. So before we start self-diagnosing, it's important to note the tests that exist, and the ones that I believe to be the most effective ones are here in this page. It is important to note that although there's all kinds of tests, the fecal test on its own, that is the most prescribed by doctors, in my opinion, is one of the least effective ones, because it barely marks the severity of a potential parasite unless it's in a very acute condition. So that's something about the medical model within not acute situations, where just basic tests, like even here in Costa Rica, you turn in your fecal test, which is extremely common and often diagnosed, but the person has parasites, but it just doesn't show up in the test. That's very common in the basic tests. So just a normal fecal test does not cut the cake. Like you really need to take a deeper if you really feel serious that there's something going on. Like the GI map tests are fantastic. A lot of functional medicine doctors prescribe this one because it gives further analysis as to like where the metabolic imbalance might be occurring, including DNA analysis, which I think is key. Some of the GI maps might even give you the DNA of the parasite, which is most often found through blood tests, but sometimes it can come out, depending on the severity of the case, the specific type of parasite that is pollinating. So those are my favorite ones. There's swab and stool exams. I think the swab is also excellent, again, because it brings the DNA component to it, and it goes deeper into the fecal test. So just the basic test, that's like the super cheap one, often prescribed here. I barely recommend it because it just doesn't show too much. Unless it's extreme acute, it will show up, just to be sure. Of course, the more invasive ones are fantastic as well, yet invasive is the key here. How deep do you want to go? Colonoscopies, are very invasive, but of course have helped millions of people. So if you feel like it needs to get to that level, absolutely, I recommend it. Yet for just normal, regular check-in with your body, I wouldn't recommend it. I would go more to the GI map type testing, like functional medicine doctors offer. Then you have endoscopies. There's all kinds of endoscopy type tests, but essentially where an instrument is placed through the mouth, sometimes through the nose or through the anus to see the entire GI tract. So again, it's more invasive. It obviously works, but I would go more into the other type swab stool exams where you can see also not just parasites, but fungi, candida tests, candida overgrowth potential, and so on. And then there's also urinary tests, which I think are key, which can also help analyze the potential of parasites and bacteria and other internal organs, like the kidneys and so on. Next slide, please. So just going quickly into the different kinds of parasites. I'm not going to take too long in this section because this can take hours, but I think it's a very interesting part of the process to assess and see what they look like in the event that you see them in your home. So there is 3 essential main types of parasites: the helminths, the protozoas, which are the most talked about, and then the ectoparasites. So the helminths are the ones that you can actually see very clearly in the toilet, kind of like the pictures here shown in the presentation. The roundworms, the tapeworms, the hookworms, pinworms, helminths, and hematomoeba. So those are classic. A lot of tests are very helminth-centric because they are very easy to find. And they're oftentimes the ones that grow kind of like in bigger volume, taking up more surface area in the gut. Therefore, a lot of people have dedicated more to the helminth specific assessment in order to, create a type of purge routine pharmaceutically or herbally. The protozoas are more like the type of bacterial cross-pollination, the single cell organisms that often are not seen through the naked eye. Yet, of course, they're very real and can be severe or deadly, like giardia, amoebas. Toxoplasmosis is a very classic one that many people talk about, and so on. So you can see here listed the ones that are the most common ones. There's perhaps more that are not even known to this day, since bacteria is ever evolving and ever changing. It is almost nearly impossible to track, yet these are the most known ones. These can be infected through the blood, the intestines, the brain, the skin, and the eye. So for protozoas, a lot of people recommend more of the blood test, the DNA analysis, in order to see if you really have an acute condition of this type of infection. And then the ectoparasites, which are the insects and the buggies all over the place, the fleas, the lice, the mites, the ticks. You can, of course, see them with the naked eye. These are obviously very severe, like the ticks right now in the summer in upstate New York. I know a lot of people, come to us asking us, like, what can I do to prevent? Is there like a natural fungi tick aside that you can use or take to prevent, like, perhaps the cross infestation over there? So there are many plants that can help with this. Naturally, the antiparasitics help with this type of group as well, by internally ingesting them or even topically. Let's go to the next slide, the wormies. So we just put a few here from different people's results. And if you do the community cleanse, this is one of my favorite parts where everybody just shares vulnerably what they get to see. When people are just like, I passed a worm, and they get very excited. They send pictures. Sometimes I get pictures on my phone of, specific results due to herbal practices and such. So it's really great to see what really comes out. And it might be very gross to some of you. And it might be a wonderful success to many of you as well. So the protozoas, these are more like lab test pictures where you see them in a telescope. And then the other ones are more the helminths and the flukes that you can see in the toilet. Oftentimes, for example, like biofilm, which is the more mucousy looking one, comes in long strands, and that often comes out naturally, even through, let's say, an accidental cleansing day that you didn't even plan. Sometimes it comes out, but it's woven into like fecal matter. It can be like woven into like the turd, or sometimes just in diarrhea form. You can even see it come out. And sometimes it's in tiny strands. It doesn't mean that it's always this huge clump, which it is successful, but it's a huge clump. Biofilm, I feel like, even though it's not a parasite, it's where parasites tuck under and live through. So the mucosa that lines the intestines and becomes perhaps phlegmy, and that itself creates consequences. But that's what you want to purge, since that actually hosts perhaps a whole community of larvae or eggs that might be in the intestines. So that is really key to see. So if you see sometimes just like phlegmy type looking things in the toilet, that could be biofilm, and that is great. Biofilm is also, when we have chronic phlegm, I see it a lot in children, kids that are, allergic, quote unquote allergic, but they have a lot of phlegm and they can't take it out, even if they live, let's say, in the rainforest, humid conditions most of the year. Oftentimes it's because there is an overdevelopment of phlegm in the gut. So even like helping kids move through that is great. Obviously not as invasive of a cleanse, but there is solutions you can do to kids that can just keep ongoing, rotation of specific herbs in diet, so they can purge it ongoingly, and I'll talk about kids in a bit because I've done it with my own kids and it is very, very successful. And it doesn't have to be intensive. Kids are already, their systems are so sharp. They move through things very quickly. It doesn't have to be a hyperdose at all. So here you have the rope worms, which are some of the more grossy looking ones that you see in the toilet. Those are very big and oftentimes get massive. Same with flatworms, they get huge. Pinworms get huge. The flukes are smaller, or the hookworms. So they, it's easier to miss. It sometimes might be easily that you might have passed one and you won't even notice. But it depends on how big and how long, right? And then blood flukes and whipworms that are more blood-based, more bloodier looking, are the ones pictured here as well. Let's move on to the next slide. So what else could the symptoms be signaling? So it's not always parasites. There's no need to be afraid. You don't have to be paranoid. There might be other issues occurring here, and that's also very important within the self-analysis with yourself or with the doctor. So dysbiosis is classic, and it's an imbalance of gut flora, which is what I see oftentimes. Most people don't have enough flora to help them even digest. So sometimes you might not be absorbing just because there is an imbalance in flora. Doesn't mean you have a parasite. And that might be actually the majority of cases sometimes. So the imbalance can look like too many or not enough of specific organisms that your body and biome need to maintain optimal health. Then you have Candida, which I know is very talked about. The Candida diet is also great as part of like a diet to follow naturally for parasites as well. You can tackle 2 in 1. It's very similar veins of treatment. So Candida, again, a yeast we need for survival. When it's overdeveloped, it becomes a problem. And that's when you see a lot of phlegm, a lot of biofilm, and a lot of like chronic weakness, in that sense, getting sick easily, again, very phlegmy. So there is also a potential of just that, excess mucosa. And then of course, allergies, which is a key role in all of these. Sometimes parasites signal through allergies. Sometimes Candida signals through allergies. Sometimes stress itself, hyper stress, can be signaling through allergies through specific foods, just through like the somatic experience of it. Sometimes, let's say, foods that we go to because we're in hyper stress, naturally we develop an allergy to it just because you're eating it under extreme stressful conditions. That's very classic. So most of the time when you're in hyper stress, carbs are like the most desired food, which is what feeds Candida, parasites, and so on. So that is very important to note too, like if you're in hyper stress, noting your cravings and noting the foods that are perhaps creating an allergy more than just a parasite. So yes, parasite cleanses can help, and it tackles multiple functions, not just parasites. And this is what I love about herbs specifically. Pharmaceuticals, for example, are very deeply designed to kill the helminth in a very specific way, while herbs can also help treat multiple things in the gut. that are not just parasite based. Like it'll be successful regardless if it's a confirmed parasite infection. Again, with the proper use and the proper dosing, you can achieve it and you tackle multiple fields in one shot. So let's move to the next slide. So growing up into Costa Rica, going back to that story, again, we grew up with pharmaceuticals. We were given to us. They were free most of the time. We did it at least twice a year. It was very intense. It lasts about 3 days, sometimes 5 days, depending on the severity. And again, it just wipes your flora out, meaning like not to say that they're not effective. They're very effective. Yet when you do it, there should be a protocol, even medically, that tells you you need to eat probiotics or whatever way, shape, or form right after your medication, you know? So that's where I see the missing link with prescriptions from the pharmacy. It's just like, here is the insecticide, see you later. So these are the plants that I specifically have adored. There is absolutely way more than these, but these are just the ones that I see most of the time, just even in my walk outside or around Costa Rica. These are in abundance. Hombre Grande is a classic. No matter what town or place you go to, all the locals are like, Hombre Grande, ahí está el Hombre Grande. There's always an abundance, and the trees are huge and beautiful, and it's very easy to kind of make all sorts of nice medicines with the bark. So that is really one of my favorites. Gavilana, also a weed you find everywhere in potreros, like in cowlands. You find it in, you know, any place in shape and form. You see it through the sidewalk, through, you know, anything. Abandoned garden beds and so on. So this one's very easy to consume, and it is extremely bitter. This one's one of the ones that is very hard to eat. No matter what kind of tincture or extraction, I can never give this one to my kids. They're just like, unless it's a pellet would work, but this one is very hard to administer, and most people struggle with this one, but it is extremely effective. We have this one actually in our capsules in Botanica because it's local to here, and we just absolutely like it. Pau de Arco is also a beautiful tree. Roble Sabana is also what it's called in this area. It's just these beautiful flowering trees that are just absolutely gorgeous. They flower about once a year, and they're just amazing. So they themselves, the bark, a lot of people also do things with flowers. The inner bark is the most essential part here to use. Oftentimes, traditionally here, it's taken as a tea. So you kind of make a decoction and you drink it warm. The way I like to consume it is as a chai. So you add it as a base to your chai, and you can add like cardamom, cinnamon, clove, also great antiparasitics, and make yourself a chai, which that's what I love about chai. It's naturally designed to be like a harmonizing gut antiparasitic tea naturally. So, which we'll get into the food stuff later, but I just love cultures that have naturally created teas that they drink throughout the day, often just because they're naturally toning and maintaining a healthy gut. So again, that's a big key. Like, what have people been doing for centuries, naturally woven in their life in food and medicines that are just super pleasant and easy to cook with and use. They just help you stay in an ongoing maintenance, right? So Sorosi is also great. A super weed you see everywhere. You also see it a lot in Asia. This is a delicious kind of cucumber looking, you can see it in the picture, looking plant that has this wonderful fruit. And you can eat the leaves as well. In Asia, you see it a lot in salads, like they're often pickled, super bitter, super sour, but it's super delicious. So you can add it to even your ferments, whatever it is that you're liking to cook with. Senna is also classic. You see it everywhere. It is a beautiful tree, often an ornamental in many gardens in the rainforest. This one's more of a true healer to the constipation that you might be experiencing. So it's definitely used for that type of like super flush elimination. Then Artemisia mugwort, you see it everywhere around here, up north. You can see it in California. You can see it in many different places. This one's also a true healer that can tackle multiple systems. So it cleanses the blood, it helps in the purge, it tones the gut, assists bile function. It's a soft tone to the gallbladder, also assisting in the elimination process. So it's a great purgative, yet also very mineralizing and balancing to the gut. Targua is also a powerful resin used here. They commonly call it like the internal Band-Aid, but it's also deeply antiviral and antiparasitic and antifungal. So here you drink it in like a few drops, again, as an ongoing maintenance type plant. And it's just a wonderful super tonic. Then we have guapinol, a fruit you see here all over Costa Rica as well. The husk is extremely strong, and you have to hammer it down and open it to see these like seeds covered in like a powdery kind of harina, like a flour. And that's what's often used for cooking. You eat it direct. It's like super powdery and delicious. And it's a super medicine. So here, oftentimes for the antiparasitic component, you use the husk and the inner bark for the medicinal, super medicinal purge type use. Chancapiedra, also a super weed. You see it all over the place in many parts of the world. In India and all the east side, you see so many uses for Philanthus. So Philanthus is a huge family, and the Philanthus niruri is specifically Chancapiedra. But this one also has many relatives that are also extremely medicinal for the purge, for the mineralization, strong kidney support, and gallbladder support here as well. Very easy to use. I add it to my salad. I pick it fresh in many different areas. I don't recommend harvesting from the sidewalk if it's a dirty place, but you can definitely start growing it just simply from what you find anywhere and grow it in most places. So most people here think it's like a super weed and they want to eradicate it, but people that know and keep it around. It's a great ally. And then rabo de zorro has many different names. It's kind of like a verbena. Beautiful, beautiful plant, also used a lot in landscaping, even for like fencing between lands. And so this one's also in super abundance. Just be aware that it's like, there's a lot of pesticides and so out there. So it's important that you know to harvest in the right place also because it's in super abundance and easy to find. So just running through these, just so you can see some of the antiparasitic allies from the rainforest. Next slide. I don't know how that presentation got that red line in there, folks. Sorry about that. But interesting. Okay, so just to run through antiparasitics and the antihelminthics that you see in pharmaceuticals and in herbs. So most of the herbs fall under these two categories. They naturally will tackle and paralyze the parasite, and some of them are more of like the toning, gentle purging type action. So the mechanism of action in most antiparasitic herbs as an herbal action, is to paralyze and disrupt the central nervous system of the parasite. So that means like enzyme inhibition, oxidative stress, also digestive disruption. And the great thing about antiparasitic herbs is they support an immune modulation, meaning they really help in helping you adapt and survive ongoing. And that's what I love about it. It teaches your body to be in a state of adaptation, modulation. The scope of action is very broad, meaning it affects most groups, the protozoas, the helminths, fungi, and bacteria. Again, another super plus of herbs, whether you do both or just one, meaning pharmaceuticals and herbs, you at least get to tackle more fields just by what you're consuming. So that's what I really love about that. The side effects of herbs are way less drastic when done in the proper dosing than the pharmaceuticals. All in all, let's say the 3-day cleanse of the pharmaceutical versus the antiparasitic, you just feel less of the consequences in your gut post like intensity of cleanse. So let's say you did do the pharmaceutical because you have an acute condition, then definitely continue with soft teas and mineralizing teas after to tone your gut and rebuild your flora. So again, gentler. It does cause detox symptoms, of course, no matter what route you take, and perhaps feelings of allergic reactions. But the other side of it, once you make it through, is blissful 95% of the time. So the anti-helminths are great. They're also called vermifuges or vermicides, meaning that they destroy and paralyze the parasite. So it's specifically targeted to the worm's metabolism and nervous system as well, disrupting their ability to function and reproduce. So they often paralyze them and expel them. Here, the classic pharmaceuticals, which I know many of you know, is albendazole, menbendazole, ivermectin, and I always say this one wrong, praziquantel. I don't know how to say it. But the first three, ivermectin, became very popular the last few years. And again, it's very common. And I wanted to add a note here also for veterinary type medicine. So what's interesting is that even in livestock around the world, from Nordic countries to rainforest countries, you see the deworming process very solidly installed in the scheduling of livestock management. I have never not heard of a farmer, no matter what their beliefs are, of not deworming their animals for health at least twice a year or ongoing. Some farmers even plant plants that they eat, like let's say chicory, that help deworm their animals ongoing. And then they do like pharmaceutical medicines as well. So regardless, you see it classically scheduled in livestock, Nordic and rainforest countries. So why wouldn't we do it? Why wouldn't we be doing this at least twice a year as well? Our animals are doing it, we can do it ourselves too. So ivermectin, I use this one on my animals all the time. It is very effective, especially in the rainy season here. We sometimes do it more than twice a year for animals, and you can see it very, effective in maintaining their health. And so, really consider that also for your animals. It's really vital for their health, including ours. So scope of action, very similar. It dismantles a worm, breaks it down, and often just like explodes them essentially from the inside out, and then they kind of come out dead. And here is where we're going to talk about soon, activating the die-off process in the best way possible to eliminate the worms and the transit as best as possible so they don't stay in your body, creating secondary symptoms of toxicity, of just excessive die-off in the body. So since the pharmaceuticals act so quick and they kind of like explode all the worms, it works great. It's very fast acting. It's important that the die-off process is taken very seriously for yourself. So just be sure you drink, like, let's say the gut sweeping type teas, like psyllium husk, marshmallow root, milk thistle to support the gallbladder and like blasting the enzymes out, washing it out, and herbs that can really assist in the elimination process. So the side effects of ivermectin, albendazole, menbendazole can be like nausea, dizziness, liver strain, and die-off effects in general, just feeling like even eyesight. Sometimes eyesight feels a little weaker just because it's a lot of die-off symptoms and more. Other key herbal actions to find within your herbal directory are the bitters and the aromatics, which are the delicious plants that are often in our kitchen pantry. So all the chai spices, every single one of them is fantastic for this process, pre, during, and post, ongoing. It's just easy plants that you can drink all the time. You cannot overdose on them. It's just general gut maintenance. Same with bitters. Let's say it's springtime. If you see lots of dandelions, nettle, cleavers, chicory, and more, use those. It's a time to cleanse. Use those as signaled from nature to integrate them in the best possible way in your diet to boost up the cleansing naturally, even if you're not in a cleanse, just like ongoing delicious plants to add in any part of your diet. Next slide, please. Okay, so just covering more plants to add into your wonderful kitchen, many of which are already probably there. Clove, I just mentioned clove, wonderful plants from India to North America being reviewed here. So clove is one that we should integrate in every way, shape, and form. I think it's just one of the best and perhaps underestimated antiparasitics out there. It's commonly found in many of the antiparasitic formulas you see online, and for good reason. Some of the microscopic tests, when they throw just even clove tea into alive organisms, they start getting eradicated almost instantly and breaking into pieces. So again, chai, so brilliantly designed to help us do this on a day-to-day basis. Switching out your coffee, let's say if you are in a cleanse, for a chai tea and throughout the day is a great way to integrate like a cleansing type day to your day, or even for more significant cleanses. Moringa, fantastic herb, also in super abundance. It's so easy to use. It's so delicious. The fresh leaves, the seeds, the bark, every single part of the tree is super medicinal. So I love using the leaves in salad. You can do delicious teas. You can add the powder into your chimichurri, into your pesto. It's a very easy culinary plant, as well as a medicinal herb. It's very gentle. You can't overdose on it. And it's just excellent for ongoing maintenance. So it's an excellent antimicrobial, and it's more of a milder antiparasitic, but it's a great one to formulate with, especially with the heavy hitters. Then we have amla, very commonly used all over Asia, India, especially Ayurveda. There is many kinds of philanthus. Like I was saying, the philanthus is a very big family. So most of the herbs in the Phyllanthus family are just excellent and have very common medicinal uses that I adore. So if there is a different kind of Phyllanthus in your region, definitely explore it. Very rich in vitamin C, super adaptogenic. It's an immune modulator. Definitely assists pre, post, and during the process. You want to keep your antioxidants high so you don't have the energy crashes. So this is the one that you want to use to stay, not feeling too beat down if you're going through an intensive cleanse process. Golden seal is definitely harder to come by. It's a very important plant to use mindfully. It is extremely strong, very high in berberine. All the plants containing berberine are excellent during the antiparasitic process. So definitely integrate it into your day-to-day. There's like, for example, turmeric, golden seal, of course, Oregon grapefruit. They're all very high in berberine. So definitely go to those yellow dock. Yellow dock's also super abundant and a great analog in this case to use if you can't access golden seal. I know golden seal is very pricey, so a lot of people refrain also from buying it for that reason, other than it's, of course, a plant that needs to be in mindful hands, but it's excellent for fighting infections. So golden seal, yellow dock, Oregon grapefruit, all the berberines. So definitely upload on those as you're cleansing or through routine. It can be added to your tea easily, and they're just delicious, vibrant yellow, orangey type menstruums. Beautiful. And then chaparral. I know many of you in the desert know this one. I absolutely love chaparral. It's just an incredible plant. It's very spiritual in nature. I feel like every time I'm in its presence, it just has this strong, wise elder energy. And I really appreciate it in this type of cleanses. It's an incredible lymphatic decongestant. Also, women that might be struggling with more of like, let's say if you're doing a parasite cleanse and you struggle with deep pain, menstrual pains, this is one that I like to do in that kind of like double use, clearing the womb and clearing the gut in joint function. And it does so much more. It's also strong antiparasitic, antifungal, and antiviral. Let's move on to different part of the world next. So Europe to Asia, many of these we are very familiar with. A lot of the European pharmacopoeia we see in every part of the world. It seems like the European plants have really like gone and gone everywhere with ease, especially like oregano, tea tree, more typical to Australia, but those are two that you see in most people's first aid kits. So for good reason. Oregano contains carbachol, thymol, both highly effective against intestinal parasites, candida, and bacteria. So multiple uses. So easy to cook with. I go to my chimichurri recipe every time because you can add these fresh herbs easily. It doesn't have to be an essential oil. Tons of like big, high amounts of volume of fresh herb conducted into easy recipes for day to day. Even kids, oregano is an easy one to use with kids. You can add it even to a little bit into lemonades, a little bit into teas. It doesn't have to be overpowering. It can even be used with raw honey for children. Raw honey is also great for parasites. So an easy integration there. Oregano oil is more classically used in that sense, yet you can make milder versions of the oil for kids, like steeping it in olive oil, even castor oil for body rubs. In that case, using the essential oil there is fine as well. But you can also just like macerate the herb in the actual oil in high doses and use it for, topical uses and beyond. Black walnut and wormwood, you see these two as like the two heavy hitters around the world in almost every single antiparasitic formula. And they both are extremely effective. If you don't have access to black walnut, pau de arco is often used interchangeably here if you create your own formula, for example. So, but of course, they both have different secondary actions. So just important to, to keep that in mind. Obviously, if you can use the three of them as your core base essential, I highly recommend that too if you're formulating yourself. But black walnut is excellent for roundworms and pinworms specifically, just because there is a lot of studies specifically to the Hellman's department. So in that case, I recommend that one too if you're sticking to like a singular one. Also easy to use with kids, add it to your raw honey, to your vinegars, and beyond. Even in Italy, I think there's like a black walnut liqueur, which I think is brilliant. It's like you can just tell the ancestral recipes, every way, shape, and form. They're just using these essentials on a day-to-day through beautiful alchemy. So you could even make a liqueur with it and enjoy it frequently. Doesn't mean to be a hyperdose. Again, it can be ongoing in your culinary excitements. Olive, we all know olive, such a powerful plant. Olive leaf, the olive itself, used olive oil, like excellent quality. Extra virgin olive oil is one of the best remedies possible. Even drinking olive oil to excite and dilate the gallbladder is an excellent part of the process that you could integrate. Again, it has to be extremely high quality if you're consuming it in that way. There's so many oils that go rancid in the marketplace, and it's almost impossible to taste sometimes. So it's important that it's not oxidized if you're using it for this kind of medicinal purpose. So just be sure you're getting it from a real good Italian source or a Greek source or anybody in the Mediterranean that you know that you might be able to access to before you start like medicating with it, essentially. Because if not, it's just like an overload of bad fat, and that's the last thing you want in a parasite cleanse and in general. And then rue, you see rula everywhere in Costa Rica. It is a fundamental classic herb here, from like kitchen witchery to spirituality to parasite cleansing. We use this one often. We cooked with this one as well. Very oftentimes it's added even to beans, similar to like boldo. Boldo is also an excellent rainforest one, by the way. Even though rula is from the Mediterranean, it's been here for so long, and it's, even like there's deep Mayan texts that speak on like the spiritual and parasitic spiritual cleansing processes of rula itself. So it's one of my favorite ones, and it is very intense. It is to be used only in small amounts, same as wormwood. They both are very microscopic amounts, essentially, in the long term of your life. So you just want to use it with other plants. Let's say if you're doing something with oregano, you want like 10% of your formula to be rula or wormwood. You don't want to be overdoing it. If you're in a very specific cleanse, let's say you're doing a week, 2 week, 3 week, it's fine to go a little higher, but it should never be more than a 10 to 20% of the formula you're using, even in concentrated cleansing times. It can definitely be intense, and although it can help with acute parasite conditions, it is important that you don't overstimulate and have terrible detox symptoms due to high doses. So just be sure that the heavy hitters are always a smaller portion of your formula if you're making your own teas and such. But rula is one of those. You can even just tell, like when you taste either of these two plants in your mouth, let's say you tip part of the plant, you can just tell immediately, oh, wow, I'm only going to use this much, like you don't want to use a lot. And the plant just tells you naturally. And that's a way to guide yourself in the garden. Like, how does the plant taste? How much should I use? It is in the taste. The taste always reveals its nature, and it's important to follow that. Next slide, please. So Africa to South America and the Caribbean. So we already spoke here about Senna. Excellent laxative, excellent for elimination, for the die-off process towards the end of your cleanse. You can add it in there and it'll help flush it out if you're dealing with constipation, potentially due to parasites. Also a great one to just kind of get the engine going and flush it out. Also in only specific amounts of time. You don't want to, if you're dealing with chronic constipation, Senna is not like a Band-Aid to use long-term. It's important to just use in very concentrated portions to just help get the wheels churning and increase gut motility, which is huge. A lot of these plants increase motility, meaning like it helps move the intestine in a way that is just like those micro movements that push parasites out naturally, and any kind of bacteria or any kind of waste, including phlegm and so on. So all of these increase gut motility, and that's what's incredible. So think about it that way. So how can you move those intestines, even manually with your hands, with castor oil in your hands? How can you move the belly to move parts of it that just stay stuck in certain places that just need to get kind of like moved around to push things out? So Senna is one of those. Noni, you see this growing also very abundantly in rainforest places. You often see them growing in the beach, sometimes in the lower mountains, around rivers. You just see it very present. Vinegar with the fruit is one of my favorite probiotics that are like homemade. You can macerate the fruit in vinegars, and you just literally drink like a teaspoon of vinegar a day, and it's a great boosting probiotic. It's also super tasty. You can make salad dressings. You can, use it as a facial toner. You can just add it in many different ways. It's incredible. If you're dealing with like gut upset, it's just a great way to like, really boost things out and kind of make you rebalance quickly as a vinegar. So traditionally used to treat intestinal worms, malaria. It's often in recipes for malaria, skin parasites, and liver disorders. also an immune modulator, which is not often talked about. So it's just a brilliant, brilliant herb to integrate, herb, plant, fruit that you can just, easily use. Also, all parts of it, the leaf, the fruit, and the bark, and sometimes the roots are even used. The roots are actually, I've seen in several Amazonian traditions that the roots are used to balance blood sugar and even for pre-diabetic predisposition, also really recommended in that sense. Ajo sacha, also an abundant, beautiful plant you see all over South America and Central America, called wild garlic. So very high in sulfur. Like garlic, it is a very strong antifungal, antibacterial, antiviral, antiparasitic. It just nails all the check boxes here. So this one has been used interchangeably with garlic, and it's more of like the native, quote unquote, garlic that is used here in this sense. Traditionally used in the Amazon to expel intestinal parasites, especially helminths here. Papaya, we all know this one, eating the papaya seeds, right? Papaya leaf, often used also in very intensive type viruses, like dengue. A lot of people that get the mosquito dengue use the papaya leaf successfully to help combat some of the symptoms. But the seeds are incredible. The seeds really help flush it out, kill parasites. It's supposed to neutralize their metabolism to kill them and essentially relinquish them out of the body. So I really recommend papaya seeds. My brother actually taught me a great recipe that you dehydrate the papaya seeds. A lot of people just scoop it and eat it as a teaspoon raw, but I think it's pretty intense. So when you're not in the mood for that, he taught me to put it in the dehydrator and use it as a pepper. So you can just add it into your pepper grinder, dried, and just sprinkle it on your salad and any kind of food you're having. And you can have it like on a daily basis. You can even mix it with black pepper too. And it's just a great one to also kind of like microdose on the daily for ongoing maintenance. Easy for kids that are into the peppery vibes, an easy one to integrate for them as well. Soursop. So this one is just incredible, guanábana, and many within the annona family are very, very powerful medicines and fruits. So the seeds, the bark, and the leaf are often used medicinally, although the fruit is absolutely delicious, definitely one of my favorites. What is used more medicinally is actually the bark and the leaf, especially even for anti-cancerous properties that many have spoken about. The leaf is incredible in that process, or formulas, I mean. So here, in a more parasitic context, it's excellent for both protozoa and helminths. So it has strong antimicrobial, antiparasitic, and insecticidal activity. So you could even add this to formulas as an insecticide, however needed. Even in the garden, you want to do menstruums for garden type insecticides, the natural, a great leaf to integrate into that formula. And last but not least, chicory, very often used in livestock, even in Nordic countries, even North Africa, all the way up north. You see a lot of livestock eating a lot of chicory, which is, again, a great deworming medicine for everyone, including humans. It happens to be extremely tasty. Going back to the aromatic bitters, this one you can integrate into your diet easily. It's a great substitute for coffee, especially if you're in a cleanse, when coffee is highly recommended to be taken off the list. You can substitute for a chicory coffee, and it's just delicious. This is one of the main bases in our happiness formula for good reason. Prebiotics, it soothes the gut, it's very grounding, it's very aromatic, it's beautiful digestive plant to just like easily use. I love combining it with like burdock and dandelion root, and there's many others, like same chai spices. It kind of has that nice grounding, earthy, chai type base. Also delicious to combine with pau de arco if you're seeking companion plants for multi-purpose. Next slide, please. So I wanted to hand off this part of the presentation to Sarah, so she can start guiding us a bit into all the different wonderful foods we can integrate. This is going to be part into like the community cleanse that we'd love to, share with whoever feels like onboarding, and just easy foods that you can use in your day-to-day. Again, even if you're not cleansing, these are foods here that we recommend ongoingly for routine maintenance. So Sarah, I've met her here in Costa Rica, and it's so great to, share herbal knowledge and goodness with, and I just love sharing with herbalists. And I think it's a great way to kind of, speak, especially with her experience in the rainforest. I know, the parasitic reality of these rainforest potentials. So Yeah, please speak on the cleanse and the cleansing foods, and I'm here.
Nice. Thank you so much. It was a really great class. You're such a good teacher. I love being a student. So thank you and welcome everybody who is here again and again. I'm seeing all of your questions and we'll be getting to some of those at the end of this, but really in the whole program that we're creating is where you're really going to like get to just pick the brain and figure out more about what could be going on to help to bring balance into your body. So antiparasitic foods and culinary options. I really love talking about chai, like you were mentioning before. And when we look at our herbal traditions in foods, we know that our spice cabinet, that is what really protects our digestive health. And especially as we're around the equatorial belt or moving out into the subtropics, you know, you kind of find the farther you get away from the equator, a little bit more bland or less spicy the food becomes, because we need these spices, especially around the equatorial belt, to protect our digestive health, right? And we're doing this through many of the essential oil compounds that are present in these plants. So you'll see things like hot sauces and chimichurris and chais and different types of more spicy or pungent teas. And as we get a little bit more north, we do, or south, away from the equator, closer to the poles, we do see things that tend to be more bitter or fermented or salted or dried. And so the food preservation process is really interesting to look at traditionally on how people protect themselves from pathogens in the environment. So coconut meat is absolutely delicious. Here in Costa Rica, we do eat a lot of it. And I'm sure for any of you folks living around the globe, especially in tropical climates, it's probably a pretty regular part of your diet, whether it's the meats or the water or the oil, but it's also, you know, very popular in other places too. And you can get it in most of your grocery stores. Just be really mindful with the coconut meat not to have the sugared. So sometimes it's a little candied, especially if you're getting it from the baking aisle. You want to make sure it's just raw, dried meat. So coconut, besides, you know, having the amazing water present in it, which is like the most perfect electrolyte that you can take quite often. I mean, you could take it every day, but during your cleanse, it's really nice to support the detox pathways of the kidneys, as well as to hydrate mucous membrane and other parts of your body, just to, you know, really make sure that you're passing through what your body might need to let go of. But the coconut meat itself has lauric acid, caprylic acid, and capric acid, which disrupts specifically the lipid membrane of protozoas, bacterias, fungi, and viral infected cells. And here in the tropics, we also work with it topically a lot for fungal infections. I really like it. And to prevent, like for bug sprays, I like it a lot, especially we have little sandflies here, which spread leishmaniasis, or what we know as papillomoya. Not all of them, but that is one of the vectors for it. So they don't really like coconut oil. So if you are living in tropical climates, using coconut oil can be really beneficial too. So pumpkin seeds, really delicious. We know them very high in selenium. A lot of you folks have maybe heard about them for, you know, health for people who have a prostate and supporting them long term, especially with inflammation. There's a lot of antioxidant and beneficial essential fatty acids present in pumpkin seeds. But in terms of things like cleansing, there's something called cucurbitin. So it's the cucurbit family, or the Curbitaceae family, right? So relative to pumpkins and soto C, which we saw earlier, which is a little type of curbit, or any of your melons and squashes out there, but pumpkin seeds in particular, what the cucurbitin does is it paralyzes the worms. So remember how Adriana was talking about these mechanisms for how the plants work. Sometimes it's like paralyzing them so we can work with other plants, herbs, mushrooms, foods to help to disrupt their membranes, to help to paralyze their nervous system, and help to expel them. So we're going to paralyze them in this case. The pumpkin seeds too are also a great source of essential fats, so important for epithelial cells from the mucous membrane to your skin, to your eye health, as well as they have fiber to them. So it's that roughage, which is really important. Like when we get to the rice or psyllium husk or clay or activated charcoal, that's also helping you to bind and expel and scrape out the intestinal wall. There's also a lot of zinc present in pumpkin seeds besides selenium. And so this is really important for immunity, but also for the health of your mucous membrane. So especially people when they're dealing with allergies or chronic inflammation in the gut, pumpkin seeds are very, very important to add to it. I would say with the caveat for things like ulcerative colitis is where you might actually want to avoid things like pumpkin seeds, just because they are small and there's so much inflammation that small particulate can get stuck in there. So that would maybe be the contraindication for pumpkin seeds for folks who are dealing with that. Fermented foods. I think you guys did a class at Botanica recently. I see Anima Mundi, some of your shops do fermented foods classes. I really recommend that everyone take a fermented foods mini class, master class, full day class, and try to integrate them into your diet, whether it's through kimchi's and sauerkrauts. Sourdough bread is not exactly it is a fermented food, but it's cooked, so it's not really living anymore. It's more pre-digested. But fermented foods can also look like things like jun and kombucha and different types of vinegars. Here in Costa Rica, I make a lot of banana vinegar. I have more bananas than I can eat. I kind of lose my mind about it. But the vinegar is absolutely amazing, and we can make it pretty fast. You can pretty much make vinegar out of any fruit, and you can turn it into hooch later if you want and have a nice fermented prebiotic, probiotic beverage. It also make you feel happy. So fermented foods in particular, they really help to repopulate the good or the beneficial non-pathogenic bacteria, fungi, viruses, perhaps parasites in the gut. So all the angels we want present there, and creating what's called colonization resistance. So it's strengthening the colony of beneficial bacteria and not allowing these other perhaps non-beneficial or pathogenic bacteria, fungi, protozoa, worms, viruses that are present in your gut to not overtake. We're not necessarily going to be able to rid ourselves 100% of things that we consider bad. They are a part of this dynamic balance of our microbiome, just like actually a healthy strep balance in the mouth prevents gingivitis, for example. So, we're not trying to just like blast all these things that we stamp bad. We want to bring them into a balance that is not causing us harm anymore. So what also we have in fermented foods are two different types of acids. So acetic acid and lactic acid. And the acetic acid tends to come more from fruits. Lactic acid tends to come from veggies. So it's a bacterial ferment or a yeast or a fungi ferment that we're getting from the fruits. With the acetic acid, lactic acid, more of a bacterial ferment, working with sugars or working with salt to stimulate the whole process. And I also saw Anima Mundi recently, you guys are putting out a really nice like recipe for making brines. Like that juice is not even just eating it. It's like taking sips of the juice. You can make all kinds of fun things with it, like elixirs and mock martinis and stuff with brines are really delicious. Put them into sauce. It's like fermented foods really, integrating these into your diet are also inhibiting the bacteria and the potential pathogenic protozoas that are present there as well. They're anti-inflammatory, full of vitamin C, supporting the immune system. So look to see how you can fit it into your diet, whether it's in beverages, whether it's in foods, little thing, or like miso soups, little bits of it. We don't need to overdo our fermented foods. A tablespoon or two goes a really long way. Papaya seeds, Audrey already talked about. I really love these. I go for papaya. We have so much papaya here. It's such an amazing food, especially as you're in the rebuilding process. This is where papaya fruit and the seeds can be really beneficial, super high in vitamin C, also in the flesh of the fruit, but also very, very easy to digest. It's like first baby food, so I think it's something that is very simple sugars, but high in vitamin C, but really nourishing and very cooling and anti-inflammatory. The seeds themselves, I really like them. I never really take more than maybe a tablespoon to a teaspoon at a time. For some folks, in a dose that high, like a tablespoon can cause some digestive upset. So I really encourage you, if you're getting started with papaya seeds, just start with like a half a teaspoon and see how your belly feels. And every time I make a smoothie, they go right in with the rest of the fruit. I usually don't pick them out unless it's like a ton of them. Garlic, people love garlic. We can find this also in many different ecosystems around the planet. Here in Costa Rica, we've got these really cute little super spicy ones that take 25 minutes to peel every time you try. You've got bigger ones in Italy with these like elephant garlics. They're literally like the size of like this. They're crazy big, super delicious. And garlic is an absolutely amazing medicine food. So garlic inhibits both protozoas and, not both, protozoas, bacteria, fungi, and some worms. There are components, specifically these sulfur compounds that are present in garlic. That's why sometimes it can almost smell slightly farty, not like quite like a fart, but kind of, that are very antifungal and can help to paralyze and disrupt the membrane on worms. What they really have, though, is saponins present, and the saponins are what disrupts membranes, as well as the reproductive enzymes that helminths need. So the allicin that is present, these sulfur compounds, these saponins, they all are just helping to break up and pass out, these pathogenic little critters that are in your body. The other super interesting thing, though, about alliums and garlic in particular is that they also are prebiotic, which is kind of mind-blowing when you think about the intelligence of nature, and that these are our foods and how do we start eating these things, is that the prebiotic compounds, and we will get into this much deeper in the program when we're talking about digestive health and digestive foods and what's happening in the microbiome, because there are things called short chain fatty acids, which are a byproduct from our healthy bacteria consuming what they love to eat, roughage, like we were talking about chicory or moringa or broccoli or any green veggies. It's essentially mulch for the gut. And what they release in these short chain fatty acids that we also find in chicory, that we find in burdock, that we find in cinnamon, that we find in licorice, they are very powerful anti-inflammatories to the mucous membrane of the digestive system. So it's antimicrobial and it's probiotic and prebiotic at the same time, not pro, but it's prebiotic and antibiotic at the same time. It's just an amazing food. Some people can handle it better raw. Some people can handle it better when it's cooked. Really pay attention to your own constitutional needs when you're starting to play around with garlic. And one of the best things to do are like pestos and chimichurris. It's like medicine food, adding pumpkin seeds, adding hemp seeds, adding coconut meat, and just making, like delicious medicinal foods you can take all the time. We put rice on here, and it's funny because a lot of people, say don't eat any grains when you're doing parasite cleanses. And I very much agree with this, especially in terms of things like wheat and corn. Rice, though, has, it's a little bit more neutral energetically. Of course, you want organic, but what we're doing with rice, if you are considering it as a part of your cleanse protocol, is actually undercooking it a little bit. So leaving it a little tough, a little hard, and imagine this is just a bulking agent that is going to help to scrape out the intestines. So we can bind, we can kill, and we are pretty much just like forcing the intestine to expel these things. And what happens when the good bacteria consumes food is what we call like a bulk laxative. So rice, oats, flax, beans, even with all the fiber, is that when the bacteria consume this, their waste product is what stimulates peristalsis. So it stimulates the intestine to contract. Whereas something like Senna, for example, that is a anthraquinone laxative that actually makes the intestine contract. And that's why, and same thing with castor oil, when you take it internally. And so it can cause some cramping. So this is also why taking things like clove and ginger and cinnamon and all of the culinary spices, peppermint even, are going to help with some of that intense cramping that you can experience. So as we're thinking about our food choices, and what you'll find if you register for the program, we have this very extensive PDF with a huge shopping list, is you're going to want to avoid certain things. Coffee, 100%. Coffee puts us into fight or flight mode. That's why we get all like jazzed and having a fun time. But really, it's so important to care for the nervous system during this process. And that's why we have in the program, like the mineralizing tea is just like, it's food for the nervous system. It's so amazing, which is going to help us to rest and relax and be able to expel and let go of what isn't helping us anymore, what really is perhaps even causing us harm. So on the physical, energetic, and spiritual levels, we want to consider this. So in that shopping list, you're going to see no simple sugars, no coffee, but what can you take? You can take things like green tea. You can even take things like chai, which has some black tea, and you can drink some yerba mate. Yerba mate and tea a little less. They are diuretic also, so they can be a little bit drying. So you just want to make sure that you're hydrating really well when you're in a cleansing process. But green tea and mate both have been shown to have some antiparasitic qualities to them, and green tea in particular with the catechins, which are very strong antioxidants, which helps with any of that inflammation from die-off. So fun times with food. Matcha, yeah, matcha is a green tea. Alexa, I just jumped in and answered that one. I'm supposed to wait for the questions, but yeah, matcha is green tea. Cacao, a little, no. So cacao doesn't have, I would say you could still take a little cacao, especially when you're cleansing. And, you know, it's like if you just cut coffee out, you're going to get things like constipation, you're going to get moody, and you're going to get headaches. So, you know, it's okay to substitute like a small bit of cacao, especially for that headache and especially for constipation, but it doesn't necessarily have antiparasitic qualities to it. I did a parasite cleanse a few weeks ago with this protocol now, and I really love the happiness coffee. I drink mate, so you don't get the whole that like withdrawal that you get from coffee. So, but I was actually great off of mate for that week and taking the happiness coffee. It was super yummy. Next slide, please. All right, so there are a lot of other rituals and therapies that support cleansing. And we'll be getting into this also in the program. Every week, there'll be different suggestions for ritual cleansing, for other, you know, focusing on our other detox pathways, which is our skin, our lungs, our lymphatic system, our kidneys, our liver, and gallbladder. So we're going to dive all into that. We're not just focusing solely on the intestine because we know we are whole beings. So when we look at our ritual therapies, ritual bathing and foot baths, this is actually some of my favorite things. Like I love just like scrubbing and imagining like everything just washing down the drain, or just like immersing yourself in an herbal bath. It's just, it's so nourishing. It opens up the pores. It can support sweating depending on the temperature, and this detox that comes with also this deep relaxation of the nervous system. Breath work is really helpful, especially with the lungs, when we look to things like how do we, I did see the question come up, and we're going to scratch into it in this time about heavy metals, but one of the detox pathways of the lungs is very important, and deep breathing can help to calm and stabilize the nervous system. It's going to help to calm and stabilize the adrenal glands and cortisol levels and adrenaline and all this fight or flight. Like pay attention to, have I been holding my breath? Am I shallow breathing? Especially when you're behind your computer, you're behind the wheel of the car, and all of that stress hormone is really high. This is when the breath work is hyper important. And many of you, if you've practiced yoga, you know, things like the Ujjayi breath and that, you know, that oceanic breathing from the back of the throat really is hyper calming and helps you to bring, you know, into a very focused yet peaceful place. And so breath work, from calming ourselves to actually expelling, you know, a lot of deep rooted mucus. And this is also where things like garlic are incredible, because it helps to thin that mucus membrane to cleanse out through the lungs. Things like cleansing with sound, dinging bells, or working with the drum. I really like bells, actually, bells and bowls for helping to clear space before you sit down, especially if you take a lot of time in front of the computer. Also things like, you know, your selenite crystals that you keep nearby. But magnetic therapy is something that I can't actually speak super deeply to. I know Adriana has a little bit more experience in her community with that, but magnetic therapy is really interesting because we have a biomagnetic, electromagnetic field, you know, and a lot of it is radiating from our heart. And we see this from our planet as well, has this electromagnetic field. And so working with magnets is helping to stabilize and reharmonize our own electromagnetic field. And so sometimes they'll be pulsing, sometimes they'll be polarized, and sometimes you can see it in things like bracelets or rings or necklaces, that are stabilized in one place to focus on specific tissue and systems of the body. Things like limpias are really amazing. I put a broom here because I have some Chinese culture in me. We don't have a really deep history of it because of various things, but one of the big practices is that Chinese New Year is a really deep sweep of the house. And this is done in a counterclockwise from the front door, like literally sweeping out energetically all the gunk out of your house. And in a lot of the various traditions in Latin American herbalism is that limpias are worked with a lot of times with bundles of plants. Sometimes they can be dry, sometimes they can be fresh, sometimes they can be dipped in water, and it's working through and off the body to cleanse it. I've taken them into Temazcal before. It's really nice, especially with the ruda. A lot of them, I work a lot in Guatemala. There's a lot of parasites in people there. It's a epidemic, and they work with rue a lot in the Temazcal practices to cleanse the body. So limpias, not only physically but also spiritually, are very beneficial. Smoke cleansing, I'm sure many of you have done this around your house, whether it's working with some of the classic popular ones like white sage, which we really suggest you don't work with because of its environmental, it's very fragile, and it could actually go extinct probably in our lifetimes or the next if we don't really pay attention to how it's being cultivated. But you can work with a lot of other plants. I personally love working with lemongrass for smoke cleansing. Certain things like Adriana mentioned earlier, like the Artemisia vulgaris, the mugwort. This one we can also cleanse with smoke. Although, interesting, wormwood we do not want to burn. So wormwood does have some toxicity when it's burned. I really love another plant called pericon, which is our native tarragon here, which is another plant that we use in limpias a lot. So the smoke cleansing we can also work with to create healthy boundaries. So it's interesting, we're thinking about cleansing and the gut, and the metaphor between the gut and external cleansing is we want a healthy membrane. We want this membrane to be able to absorb nutrients, and we want it to be able to expel what isn't serving us. So as we're smoke cleansing, and working with limpias, we are creating healthy boundaries while telling what doesn't belong out now. Things like enemas and colonics. I've actually never done a colonic, but I love enemas. I've done a lot of them. These are just going to work through the lower part of the colon. Colonics are going to go a little bit higher into the large intestine. And these can be really effective for stimulating peristalsis, for helping cleansing, for helping to eliminate when there's a lot of mucus or that biofilm that could be present in your stool. And enemas and colonics, people get kind of crazy. Like there's a place here in Costa Rica and they do like juice colonics and green and chlorella based ones, like all this stuff. I don't know. I just usually use coffee or salt water and they're great. But there are a lot of different types out there. So you want to explore perhaps a practitioner in your area professionally who does colonics if you're interested. And you can get enema bags at any pharmacy, actually. They're very commonly used pretty much for chronic constipation in people. But what we have to be mindful of is that with enemas and colonics, we have to repopulate the gut, because when we're doing any major treatments like that, is that the beneficial bacteria is not just like holding on for dear life, as you're sweeping it out, it's also being taken away. And so this is where food therapy and herbs are very, very important. Temazcal, or sweat lodge, we might call these, is a way of, it's a sweat cleanse, right? We also put dry saunas on there and red light. So it's like bringing the sweat out. In a sweat lodge, we are also working with water, putting water onto the stones. It's a deeply spiritual practice. I do them a few times a year. It's just it's a really beautiful reset. It's pretty much being reborn. It's like you're going into the womb and then you're coming back out after a really deep nervous system, mental, spiritual purge that can happen. And it's really deep. It can be really hard for some people. And I really recommend, if you ever do get into a sweat lodge or a Temazcal, to make sure it's with someone who has been initiated into that practice so they can guide you well. It's not really something just to do for fun. Although in Guatemala, for example, like where their temazcals are a little more daily therapeutic. It's like if you go into areas in North America and people who walk the red road, this is where, the temazcal is like very, very deep and very, very can be very difficult and very cathartic. But, in Guatemala, for example, the temazcal, they take many times a week as like regular cleansing and regular therapies. It's quite cold there, and they work a lot with the kidneys and the fafan, supporting around the midsection. And so temazcal is an important part of the culture. Dry saunas, so we're not going to have, although the water present in there, but the dry sauna really, it can stimulate metabolism. It can also open up the pores to sweat. And you'll see that like some people who are really in perhaps, high stress, they struggle to release a lot of sweat. And it could also be, potentially an indicator of imbalance in the gut, is this inability to sweat and to like release the toxins from our body, because that is a process. And I'm not saying that we're all highly toxic, but we're constantly exposed, to different foods. If you're living in urban or suburban environments, your air quality is extremely toxic. And this is where things like breath work and working with the lymphatic system and the skin's detox pathways are really important, because we can see a lot of congestion come in. Clay masks. So clay and activated charcoal, they have this binding activity to them. So they're pulling to themselves, and they're called adsorbent, not absorbent. So absorbent's like a sponge, holds it, we can squeeze it back out. Adsorbent means it holds, brings it to itself, and it doesn't let it go. And there's a ton of surface area in both clay and in activated charcoal that will help to bind toxins, whether it's potentially some heavy metals that are being released through the gut, whether it is certain bacterial formations on the face, like with acne. Clay also, I do work with it in wound care at certain points in the reparation of the tissue. Dry brushing is so delicious and yummy. Like this just stimulates small capillaries in circulation as well as the lymphatic system. And again, we dive really deep into this in the program itself. And then things like castor oil or even oil pulling in the mouth. These castor oil is an interesting one because the bean itself is highly toxic, but once the oil is pressed out, it is not toxic anymore. So it's in the flesh of the bean, but the oil has a few different things. It's an omega-9, which is pretty rare, which is anti-inflammatory, it's analgesic, it's antimicrobial, it's lymphatic stimulating, and it's a laxative. And so that's why when you take it internal, it's stimulating peristalsis, it's stimulating the bowel to contract. But topically also, it has this ability to like dive deep into the tissue to help to break up congestion. It's very warming. A lot of people, traditional herbalists, and I remember early in my studies learning a lot about castor oil packs where people will soak cloth, wool, or cotton into warm castor oil and then pack it onto the uterus, the lower back, the kidneys, or other parts of the abdomen or the breasts, especially with potential cystic breasts that can be present. But for things like very stagnant menstrual period, for even things like potentially cysts, it can help to break that up. And during your cleansing process, you can use this to stimulate the liver. You can use it to stimulate even the kidneys on the back to keep doing what they are supposed to do. Remember that these detox pathways, that's what they're built for, is for absorption and elimination, for supporting us and making us vital and healthy and getting rid of what we don't need. And often what we don't need is super beneficial for the environment as well. Interesting. Things like our urine and our stool and our menstrual blood. So next slide, please. That's me. Hi. So we have this program that is coming up. It's called Gut Instinct, How Parasites Might Be Impacting Your Body and Your Mind. And this is a community cleanse. So Adriana and I were talking a few weeks ago about like, wouldn't it be cool to try to organize something as a group? Because maybe some of you have cleansed before, maybe you've done it, you know, in a little cohort, or maybe you've just been solo. And I know doing it solo kind of sucks because you have no support. You're sitting there like commiserating over that thing you really want to eat, and you just have to like sit there and bite your nails and like tough yourself through it. And so we decided to create a community cleanse where people can really feel the deep support of ritual cleansing together. And knowing that, you know, you can share your gross photos, and it's not like your random friend, you're like, you want to see what I pooped today? It's like, few people really want to see that unless you're an herbalist. We love to see that stuff. But, you know, so in the community cleanse, it's a 4-week protocol. We're going to do the first week, which is all just the information about how the digestive system works, what are the detox pathways, what to prepare for, how to shop, how to clear your calendar or organize your calendar in a way that's going to be beneficial for you. The second week is, and it's also going to allow you to get your kit. And then the second week is when we actually start the program. And so we're going to be going into the microbiome. And the third week, we're going to be talking about, I can show you, go next slide, please. A little bit about the program itself. So the third week, then we're going to be getting into the enteric nervous system. The enteric nervous system is the gut-brain axis. This is how our mental health, our emotional health, our spiritual health is interacting with our digestive health. And then the fourth week is going to be tending our internal garden. This is the rebuilding time, the regeneration time, where we're really thinking about like, how do we nourish this tissue long-term and create sustainable habits for ourselves. So this program, you're going to get a PDF, you're going to have access to a group where like it's a Discord group. So we're going to have all different types of channels for Q&A, for replays, for sharing, for chatting, for showing your poo photos, for just getting into it. And I'm 100% available to you this whole month. So just answering questions and being together in this process. You'll also get the kit. The kit has, next slide, please. I don't know if it's there. No. Well, you know what? You can find the kit on the website or on Instagram. It's all over there. But the kit itself, we have the happiness coffee, we have the castor oil and the tongue scraper, which are all very supportive. And then it comes with the parasite defense, the amargo's bitter, which is so good. It's like cocktail level delicious. And then the gut sweep and the mineralizing tea. So it's a whole kit. You can also refill, like if you've already purchased this. I know a lot of you folks here maybe have already got it into your apothecary, but we do have the cleanse bundle. And this is going to start on June 8th. So you have a few weeks if you would like to register. And of course, for sticking to the end of this, thank you so much. And for registering, we do have a coupon code for you. So I think we are going to open up to some Q&A and then wrap it up.
I wanted to also add, Sarah, and everybody, that me and Sarah as herbalists will be present, although Sarah will lead the bulk of the community cleanse process and the teaching. I will be there for the Q&As, and during the community classes, the community Discord group, where we all vulnerably share our process, the uncomfort, the beauty, the process itself. We'll be there as herbalists guiding you in any way. So don't feel like this is just a class and we drop you. Like, the idea is that we do this together. So I've done every, I think, possible cleanse that I've known. And the one that I've loved the most are like the Amazonian style dietas, where you are sharing in community and you're not just alone in the process. I feel like in a world where it's very easy to feel lonely, it's very powerful to be in community, even if it's through this device. So know that you'll be held if you decide to do this. And we are doing some scholarships, just so you all know. So if you all want to submit a scholarship, request, please do so and email our general info at animamundiherbals.com email, and we'll be happy to support where we can.
Thank you. And we have a few questions.
Yes, go for it.
Let's see. We'll do some hands, but I was sent a few questions so that we can touch on. So how do we enjoy the wonderful raw foods without being paranoid, such as sushi and ceviche? That's a good question. Sometimes I wish I was ignorant still. But I think what's important is pay attention to the sanitization of the area first, right? Because a lot of parasites, especially protozoas, come through not washing hands properly and lack of sanitation in kitchens. So pay attention to like what's happening. And at the same time, like you might just not know. So you want to catch it really fast. Like if you don't feel good the next day, could potentially be bacterial, something, you know, like a food poisoning, but something like worms and protozoas do take a few weeks to actually present themselves. So it's a tough one. You kind of have to go into an ignorance is bliss if you want to enjoy those types of food.
I do want to add something there, something that I have found useful. I mean, to an extent, it's not obviously 100% clean from potentials, but vinegar, so soaking things in vinegar. So ceviche, for example, which I love and I've eaten it most of my life, is something you want to macerate in vinegar for longer periods of time. So for the most part, most things do die. And it includes obviously the boost of gut, you know, microbiome resilience at the same time. So just think about vinegar. A lot of people also wash their veggies with baking soda, which again, it's only up to a certain extent. So if you have a big bin of water, add some baking soda and cleanse your stuff, just to be sure you're not just like eating straight from the farmer's market, like, which I do all the time, irresponsibly so when I'm starving. But the ideal is to just, you know, bathe them in some sort of menstruum to peel most of it, at least off.
Yeah. So one question that came up a lot is, can you cleanse while pregnant, and would that be dangerous for the baby? So we have to be very, very mindful when pregnant and taking herbs, especially because some of these herbs do have laxative qualities, which can cause or are amenagogues. So something like wormwood, or even strong amounts of garlic and ginger, and you know, like and Artemisia vulgaris, the mugwort, these, especially the two, wormwood and Artemisia vulgaris, are amenagogues. So no to those. And that first trimester of pregnancy is where you have to be the absolute most careful. I would say if you do want to do a parasite cleanse, I might actually wait till later. And then we have to also check in about breastfeeding. If you have an active parasitic, like, you know, you have it. I have a girlfriend right now who's due in just a few weeks, and she actually had a parasite at the beginning of her pregnancy. I was really scared to treat her, actually. And her doctor gave her a very strong antiparasitic, and she felt terrible from it. But, you know, she was a little scared. So I would say with extreme caution, and never in the first trimester, especially with herbs, because of these also amenagogue properties. Audrey, do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, for pregnancy, definitely no detox, but there are mild detoxing potentials and pathways, right? So going back to the pathways, I think it's better to stimulate other processes in the body versus just intaking herbs. So for example, I did a lot of like saunas in mild forms, a lot of steam inhalation of different plants, like even just peppermint, back to the chai tea, you know, so like thinking milder, since the body's so receptive at that time, is the best way to go versus having to do like heavy duty kickers.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. IT and things like even cilantro and epazote, you know, epazote is a very common apazote, sorry, say it wrong, is a very common herb that a lot of people work with in Latin American cuisine, which I think it's like where Beano got its active constituents from. But it's also called worm seed. And so that one, like cooking with that, or even potentially taking small amounts of that, might be helpful. So I would say more on the culinary level in pregnancy. So we have another question that says, should people do a heavy metal detox prior to a parasitic cleanse? So this is pretty much a whole other masterclass, and could be a whole other community cleanse. In terms of heavy metals, there's a lot of different ways to test. Of course, you can have specific symptoms, but sometimes when we're just doing symptom assessment, it's hard to really know what's happening, because a lot of symptoms can present very similarly. So with heavy metals, there are like hair testing, there's blood testing, and then there are activated, non-activated urine tests, where they'll actually give you a type of a chelation agent, which then you'll take it, and X number of hours later, you'll go to the bathroom and they can see, did my tissues release? So testing is always best in this case. And with heavy metal detoxes, we're always working on the detox pathways as well. That is how they're removed from the body, although they can concentrate in certain tissues. So it's a tricky one. It's a big one. And the difference between things like chelation and binding, right? So like binding are things like clay, which is helping to pull it into when we drop from our bloodstream into the intestines. This is where things like clay is going to help to get it out. There are certain herbs that do very gentle chelation from the bloodstream, but there's a lot stronger ones out there like EDTA and DMSA and DMPS. I've actually done the DMSA one before. It's a sulfur compound that pulls heavy metals from the tissue, and your urine, it feels like it's super thick and it smells like sulfur. It's weird and it's gross. So I would say not necessarily a requirement to doing a parasite cleanse at all. If anything, doing this cleanse is going to help to support all the detox pathways in your body and give you just a deeper knowledge of what is happening and how do you work. Like being informed is the best way that we make decisions. So I would say no, not necessarily. You don't have to do it. And you will get, especially with things like the liver vitality formula that I really love that one. That very much is working through the liver, and a lot of the ingredients in there can also help with that very gentle, pulling or very gentle chelation that the plants can do from tissues.
I also want to add zeolite is one of my favorites to use during a cleanse to support that process. So zeolite, clay, even topically or internally can really be great during the cleanse itself with the plant. So there's also ways to kind of like peel off as you're kind of, targeting multiple systems at the same time, for sure.
Yeah, that's great. Let's see, are there any other, Chloe, do we have time for direct questions? She writes me.
I think we can take about one question live.
Okay, how do we choose that? Let's see here. Let's scroll up. Okay, so
we can invite Janika up.
Okay, go ahead. Hi, Janika. Just unmute yourself. There you go.
You can speak now.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, how are you? I didn't realize that I'd been chosen. Oh, that's so funny. I apologize. I don't know why, for some reason, my girlfriend and I came together and she left, and I don't know why I'm on her Zoom. My name is Sarah, but I can be Jenica right now, and that's wonderful. Thank you for having me. I just had a quick question, and I hope no one answered it in the comment. Are these herbs, would you say, safe for if you're on your cycle or during your cycle?
You want to go, Remy?
Go for it. Give it a start.
Absolutely. I mean, when you look at the ingredients, so what's interesting if you're on, because this will happen, right? We're going to be doing a 4-month or a 4-week cleanse. So someone, probably many of us out there that have a uterus and ovaries will start to bleed. Yes, you can do it. What you might want to pay attention to, especially like some of us maybe get a little diarrhea when we bleed. This is very much because of uterine contraction, but also hormone levels can make our stool a little bit softer during. So what you might find is that you might have more of an urgency to go to the bathroom during that time. I would recommend, especially if you get a lot of cramping, maybe working with the castor oil prior to bleeding, maybe not during, although it can be helpful for some people, especially if you get a lot of heavy clotting. So it depends a little bit on the person and what type of bleed that you have. But as we're working through our detox pathways, this, especially through the liver, this is very much going to help with hormones. So we're not specifically focusing on the endocrine system during this. So we're not taking anything that's going to affect the endocrine system, but a lot of our hormones circulate through our bodies, and the liver is critical in helping us to also reset ourselves every lunar cycle, internal lunar cycle. So Yes. And there's just a few things to be aware of during that time, especially with perhaps an increase in like diarrhea or a little abdominal cramping.
And
You
then
have a comment?
is there a specific, more particular food that can support the loss of blood during this time? Because sometimes, I'll be craving certain things and I want to make
Mhm.
sure that,
Mhm.
committing to this, that I can still honor my body. And if I feel like I need to, maybe do a bone broth or something that
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, you can for sure do a bone broth. We don't recommend so much red meats, although like if it was beef bone, it would be okay. You could do a little bit more chicken, a little bit more fish. We do avoid pork during this time. I would recommend increasing your dark leafy greens, right? And how we really get to absorb the iron from our dark leafy greens is actually adding vinegar to them. This makes all the minerals so much more bioavailable. So increasing dark leafy greens, beets, although beets are sweet, like especially if you tend to run into that anemic category, you feel really low energy during that time. I would also make sure to have those on your shopping list.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Maybe one more. Chloe, you want to call someone out or call someone in?
I actually think that's a great place to wrap up.
Okay, nice. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. Thank you so much, Adriana, for giving this amazing platform for our community to dive in and work together and cleanse together. And
Yeah, it's great to be here, everybody. Sorry we went beyond overtime, but it's a juicy subject and hopefully you join us. But of course, you can chime in into the social media reality and we'll tackle questions. And the idea is to make this informational rich and to keep this information to be shared. It's very important.
nice. Thank you so much. And definitely, if you have any questions, you can reach out to the Anima Mundi team. And we're live. So if you want to join, we'd love to see you there. We do have a cap. So if you're really, really into it, we definitely recommend that you come on. And you guys will get the replay very soon, within 24 hours. So thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Great to
Chloe.
see you
Thank
all
you,
here.
Amber.
Thanks so much. We'll
Ciao.
see you all soon.